Chapter 4, Section 3 is about solving inequalities with multiplication and division. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to solve one-step inequalities using multiplication and division. So we're going to take a look at this inequality that says 4 is greater than 1. That's definitely true. 4 is bigger than 1. But I want you to pause the video in a second and fill this out. If I multiply both sides of this by 3, so here's like the 4 and the 1 still, but we multiply both sides by 3, we end up with 12 and 3. And then I want you to fill in the inequality sign in that little box. So 12 is bigger than 3, so your inequality still goes that way. Now pause the video, go through and answer the rest of these, and then I want you to answer questions 2, 3, and 4. Alright, so hopefully this is what you got. 8 is bigger than 2, 4 is bigger than 1, 0 equals 0, negative 4 is less than negative 1, negative 8 is less than negative 2, and negative 12 is less than negative 3. So what happens to the inequality when you multiply each side by a positive number? Nothing. It stays exactly the same. What happens when you multiply by 0? It all crosses off, so it becomes equal. And then the important part of this is what happens when you multiply it by a negative number. Now hopefully you notice that all of these inequalities here switched around. Now they became less than signs rather than greater than signs. And that's because on a number line, when you look at 0, you start with 1, 2, and then you move in the other direction. Now the numbers get smaller as you go this way, but the actual number gets bigger. Like 2 is bigger than 1, but because it's negative, they keep getting smaller and smaller. So it's like the number line is kind of reversed on the other side. So whenever we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to switch the sign around. So that leads us to our multiplication rules. So anytime we multiply by something bigger than 0, so this is a positive number, we just have our straight standard inequality, that whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. If you multiply for something less than 0 or a negative number, you have to switch it around. So it says A is greater than B, then AC has to be less than BC. So a negative number switches the sign. And if you notice, 0 isn't on here because if you multiply by 0, you end up with something that's equal, and we don't really care about that. So if I want to solve these, we got to get whatever the letter is by itself. So for the very first one, it's b divided by 4 is greater than 1/2. So to undo that division by 4, what I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 4. That crosses this off, and because I didn't multiply or divide by a negative number, my sign is going to stay exactly the same. b is going to be greater than 1/2 of 4, which is 2. And if we do the next one, same type of thing. D is being divided by 3, so all I got to do is multiply by 3 on both sides. That crosses off, and I get D is greater than or equal to 5/6 of 3. And remember, if you do multiplication of fractions, you can multiply across to give 15/6. And then they both have a 3 in common. So 3 divided by 15 will give you 5, and 3 divided by 6 will give you 2. So D is going to be greater than or equal to 5/2. Now let's be careful of these ones down here. We have a negative sign here. So if I want to get this k by itself, I'm going to have to multiply both sides by negative 4. And now remember, when you do that, this is still going to cross off just like normal, but we got to flip the sign. So we want k to be less than a positive 4. Same thing with this next one. To get rid of this negative 1, I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 1. So that crosses off, and I'm left with t, but we got to flip the sign, is greater than a negative 1/2. And remember, you can check this, and you can also graph your solution. So then let's use division. And the division rules are exactly the same. If c is greater than 0, which remember means positive, it stays exactly the same when you divide by the same number. If c is less than 0, which means that it's negative, all you got to do is switch the sign. You see it's a greater than and then it's a less than. So negative, you switch the sign when you multiply and you divide. So let's do some more. If I'm trying to get t by itself, negative 2 and t are multiplying. So the opposite of multiplication is division, just like anything else we've done. We get t by itself, we get a positive 4, but remember we divided by a negative number. So we want this to be t is greater than. And then remember, you can check this. So pick a number bigger than 4. Pick like 5. If you plug that in, you end up with negative 2 times 5 has got to be less than negative 8. So you get negative 10 is less than negative 8. It's true. And you would know here in your check that you didn't switch the sign, because if you didn't, you'd want numbers less than 4, and those wouldn't work. So let's skip this one in the middle. Let's do this one over here. So decimals, still the same thing. Negative 0.2 is being multiplied by n, so to undo it, I need to divide. So that crosses off, and I get n. Got to remember to switch the sign, so it's going to eat the n this time. And then when you divide those two things, just think of 6 being divided by 2. It's going to give you 3. Because one of them is negative, it's going to be negative 3. And then remember, you can always switch this around, but make sure the alligator is still eating the same thing. So right now it's eating n. So if you switch this around, it would be n is greater than negative 3. Either of those answers work. And then remember, just like I said, you can always check these and then graph your solution. So you have 4 problems to solve on your own, and we will go over these in class tomorrow. Have a good night.